I design beach houses for people who hate the sand. The irony isn't lost on me, sitting here in my pristine Chicago office, sketching oceanfront properties for clients who'll visit them twice a year and complain about the humidity. My name is Connor Hale, and I used to think I had it all figured out. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Connor, honey, we need to talk about dinner tonight. Vanessa's voice carried that particular tone she'd perfected over our 3 years of marriage. Sweet on the surface, steel underneath. She stood in my office doorway looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine, her auburn hair perfectly styled, her boutique dress hugging curves that still made my pulse quicken despite everything. Let me guess, I said, not looking up from my blueprints. Derek's joining us again, for Sophie's sake. Don't be like that. You know co-parenting requires cooperation. She moved closer, her expensive perfume filling the space between us. Derek is Sophie's father. We have to maintain a relationship. Sophie. 7 years old, sweet as candy, and completely innocent in all this adult drama. Vanessa's daughter from her engagement to Derek Vaughn, an engagement that ended supposedly 2 years before I met her. Supposedly being the operative word these days. Right. Cooperation. I finally looked up, studying my wife's face. Is that what we're calling it now? Her green eyes flashed, but she kept her smile. I don't know what you mean. Sure you don't? I turned back to my work. What time should I expect dinner for 3 to become dinner for 4? 7:30. And Connor? She paused at the door. Try to be nice. Derek's going through a rough patch at the restaurant. After she left, I sat back in my chair and stared at the blueprints. Foundation plans. Funny how you can design the perfect foundation for a house, but you never see the cracks in your own life until they're ready to bring the whole structure down. My phone buzzed. A text from Max Traeger, my junior architect and the closest thing I had to a friend these days. Drinks after work? You look like you need them. I glanced through my office window. Max was at his drafting table, pretending to work while obviously watching me. 29 years old, brilliant with spatial design, and blessed with the kind of optimism that made me feel ancient at 37. Rain check, I texted back. Family dinner. With the ex-fiancé again? Dude, that's weird even for divorced people. They're not divorced. They were never married. Still weird. Max wasn't wrong, but weird had become normal in my life. Weekly dinners with Derek, weekend trips where I was suddenly not invited, hushed phone conversations that stopped when I entered the room. All perfectly reasonable according to Vanessa. All for Sophie's sake. I closed my laptop and headed home to our suburban paradise. The house I'd designed myself. Clean lines, open spaces, floor-to-ceiling windows that let in natural light. A home that was supposed to represent our future together. Now it felt like a museum exhibit. The American Dream, circa 2024. Vanessa was in the kitchen when I arrived, wearing a different dress than the one she'd had on at my office. This one was darker, more elegant, date night elegant. You changed, I observed. This old thing? I spilled coffee on the other one. She didn't look at me, focusing intently on chopping vegetables that would probably go uneaten. Our dinner conversations had become increasingly strained lately. Sophie ran into the kitchen, her dark hair, Derek's hair, bouncing as she hugged my legs. Connor, Daddy's coming for dinner again. I heard. Are you excited? She nodded enthusiastically. He promised to bring dessert from the restaurant. The chocolate thing with the berries. Sounds delicious. I ruffled her hair, genuinely smiling for the first time all day. Whatever else was happening, Sophie didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of it. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:30. Derek Vaughn had always been punctual, a trait that served him well as a restaurant manager and annoyed the hell out of me in every other context. I opened the door to find him standing there with his practiced smile, holding a dessert box and a bottle of wine. Connor, good to see you, buddy. He stepped inside like he owned the place, which, given how often he'd been here lately, maybe he thought he did. Hope you don't mind. I brought a little something for the adults. Derek looked like he'd stepped out of a fitness magazine, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to question whether you belonged somewhere. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his shirt was expensive, and his watch probably cost more than most people's cars. How thoughtful, I said, closing the door behind him. Vanessa appeared from the kitchen, and I watched Derek's face light up in a way that made my stomach clench. Derek, you made it. Wouldn't miss it. He handed her the wine, their fingers touching just a moment longer than necessary. You look beautiful tonight, Ness. Ness. He was the only person who called her that, a pet name from their past that somehow persisted into our present. Dinner was exactly as awkward as I'd expected. Derek dominated the conversation, telling stories about his restaurant, making Sophie laugh with silly voices and exaggerated gestures. Vanessa hung on his every word, laughing at jokes that weren't particularly funny, touching his arm when she made points of her own. I might as well have been invisible. So Connor, Derek said, finally acknowledging my existence as we finished the main course. How's the architecture business? Still designing those beach houses? Among other things. I took a sip of the wine he'd brought. It was excellent, which somehow made everything worse. We just landed a major resort project in Miami. Could be a career-changing opportunity. Miami? Vanessa looked surprised. You didn't mention that. It just came up today. They want someone to relocate, oversee the entire development. It's a big promotion. Relocate? Derek leaned forward, suddenly interested. You mean move to Miami? That's typically what relocate means, yes. But what about Vanessa's business? Her boutique is doing so well. I looked at my wife. Is it? I thought you were having some cash flow issues. A flush crept up Vanessa's neck. Every small business has challenges. It's nothing I can't handle. Of course you can handle it, Derek said quickly. You're the strongest woman I know. The strongest woman he knew. Not the most beautiful, not the smartest. The strongest, like she'd been through some kind of ordeal that required strength. Like maybe ending an engagement and starting over with someone new. After dinner, Derek insisted on helping with the dishes while I put Sophie to bed. She chattered about her day at school, her upcoming dance recital, her excitement about summer vacation, normal 7-year-old concerns that felt like a breath of fresh air after the tension downstairs. Connor, she said as I tucked her in, are you and Mommy okay? What makes you ask that, sweetheart? You seem sad lately. And Mommy's been staying at Daddy's house sometimes when you're at work. She has? Just for lunch sometimes, and once for a sleepover when you were at that conference. She said it was like a play date for grown-ups. A play date for grown-ups. I kissed Sophie's forehead and turned off her light, my hands shaking slightly. When I got back downstairs, Derek was getting ready to leave. Vanessa walked him to the door, and I watched from the kitchen as they said their goodbyes. They stood close together, talking in low voices. Derek touched her cheek, and she leaned into it for just a moment before stepping back. Drive safe, she called as he walked to his car. Always do. See you soon, Ness. See you soon, not see you next week or see you at the next dinner. Soon. Vanessa closed the door and turned to find me watching her. What? She said, but her voice was defensive. Nothing. Just wondering when you were going to tell me about your sleepovers at Derek's. Her face went pale. Sophie told you that? She mentioned it, said it was like a play date for grown-ups. I stepped closer. That's an interesting way to describe co-parenting. Connor, it's not what you think. What do I think, Vanessa? Because honestly, I'm not sure anymore. She looked away. Sophie gets confused sometimes. She's 7. She doesn't understand adult relationships. Neither do I, apparently. I headed toward the stairs. I'm going to bed. Thanks for dinner. Connor, wait. But I was already walking away, my mind racing. Sleepovers. Playdate for grown-ups. The way Derek looked at her, the way she responded to him. The changed clothes, the hushed phone calls, the sudden distance between us. I lay in bed that night, listening to Vanessa move around downstairs, cleaning up from dinner, checking her phone multiple times. When she finally came to bed, she curled up on her side of the mattress, as far from me as possible. "Good night," she whispered. I didn't answer. I was too busy staring at the ceiling, thinking about foundations and cracks and how sometimes the most beautiful structures were the most fragile. Outside, a storm was building. I could hear thunder in the distance getting closer. The next morning, Vanessa was gone before I woke up. Her side of the bed was cold, and there was a note on the kitchen counter. "Early meeting with suppliers. Coffee's ready. V." No love, no XOXO, just an initial, like a business memo. I poured myself coffee and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from the Miami project team, 2 texts from Max asking if I was okay, and 1 message that made me freeze. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Your wife left her earring at my place. Should I return it to her boutique or would you prefer to handle it? D. Derek." Somehow he'd gotten my number and was texting me about Vanessa's jewelry. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times before the full implications hit me. Her earring. At his place. I called Vanessa immediately. "Connor, what's wrong? I'm in the middle of a meeting." "When did you lose an earring?" Silence. Then, "What?" "Derek texted me. Says you left an earring at his place. When were you at his place?" We had coffee yesterday morning to discuss Sophie's summer schedule. I must have." "Coffee at his condo? Why not at the restaurant?" "Connor, I really can't do this right now. I have customers waiting." "I'm sure you do." I hung up. My hands were shaking as I forwarded Derek's text to Max with a message. "What do you make of this?" Max called me immediately. "Dude, what the hell?" "That's what I'd like to know." "Are you at home? I'm coming over." 20 minutes later, Max was sitting at my kitchen table, looking at Derek's text on my phone. He was wearing his usual uniform of jeans and a vintage band t-shirt, his curly hair still messy from sleep. At 29, he still had the luxury of believing that most people were basically good. I envied him that. "Okay, so there are 2 possibilities here," Max said, setting down the phone. "Either your wife innocently lost an earring during an innocent coffee meeting, or my wife is sleeping with her ex-fiancé and he's playing games with me." I was going to say, "Or Derek is stirring up trouble for no reason," but your version is more direct. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know what the really pathetic part is? I'm not even surprised. I think I've known for weeks, maybe months." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Confront her? Hire a private investigator? Pretend it's not happening and hope it goes away?" Max was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "What does your gut tell you?" "My gut tells me my marriage is over." "Then maybe it's time to start planning for what comes next." What came next? I'd been so focused on trying to save what I hadn't considered the possibility of building something new, something better. "The Miami project," I said suddenly. "What about it?" "They want an answer by Friday. Full relocation, 3-year contract, significant salary increase." That sounds like a pretty good escape plan. Escape plan. I liked the sound of that. After Max left, I spent the day at the office trying to focus on work and failing miserably. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected another message from Derek. Instead, I got increasingly frantic texts from Vanessa. "We need to talk when you get home. Please don't make this bigger than it is. I love you, Connor. You have to believe that." Love. The word felt hollow now, like an echo in an empty room. I stayed at the office until nearly 8, then stopped at a bar near our house for a drink I didn't really want. I just needed time to think, to figure out how to handle the conversation waiting for me at home. The bar was nearly empty, just a few regulars nursing beers and watching a baseball game on the mounted TV. I ordered a whiskey and tried to make sense of the past few months. The signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Vanessa's phone face down on tables. New lingerie I'd never seen her wear. Late nights at the boutique that never seemed to result in increased sales. Weekend trips to visit her sister that she never invited me on, and that her sister later mentioned she'd enjoyed hearing about secondhand. Rough day? The bartender was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the weathered look of someone who'd heard every sob story in the book. Rough marriage, I said. Want to talk about it? My wife is cheating on me with her ex-fiancé. They have a kid together, so he's always around. I've been telling myself it was innocent, but... I showed her Derek's text. She read it and winced. That's not innocent. That's a guy marking his territory. That's what I was afraid of. What are you going to do about it? I honestly don't know. She refilled my glass. Can I give you some unsolicited advice? Sure. Don't confront her tonight. You're angry, she's probably scared, and nothing good comes from that combination. Go home, get some sleep, and deal with this when you can think clearly. She was right. But when I got home, Vanessa was waiting in the living room with a bottle of wine and what was clearly a prepared speech. Connor, we need to clear the air about this morning. I sat down across from her, noting that she'd changed into one of my favorite dresses. Strategic wardrobe choice. I'm listening. Derek was completely out of line texting you like that. I told him so when I called him this afternoon. You called him. To tell him to stay out of our marriage. Yes. She leaned forward, her eyes wide and sincere. Connor, I know how this looks, but nothing is happening between Derek and me. We're co-parents. That's all. Co-parents who have coffee at his condo. It was convenient. Sophie was at school, he had the morning off, and we needed to discuss her summer schedule without interruptions. And you just happened to lose an earring. I have no idea how that happened. Maybe it fell off when I was hugging Sophie goodbye the night before. She was at Derek's for a sleepover. Another sleepover. Sophie has a lot of sleepovers at Derek's. Connor, what are you implying? This was my moment. I could lay all my cards on the table, demand the truth, force a confrontation that would probably end our marriage. Or I could accept her explanation, pretend to believe her, and continue living in this strange limbo of suspicion and doubt. I'm not implying anything, I said finally. I just think maybe we need some space to figure out what we want. Relief flashed across her face so quickly I almost missed it. What kind of space? I'm thinking about taking the Miami job. For how long? 3 years, maybe permanently. Now she looked genuinely shocked. Connor, you can't be serious. My whole life is here. My business, my friends, Sophie. Sophie isn't my daughter, Vanessa. And lately, it feels like you're not my wife. That's not fair. Isn't it? I stood up. When's the last time we had dinner alone together? When's the last time we talked about anything other than Derek or Sophie or your business? When's the last time you looked at me the way you looked at him tonight? I don't look at Derek any particular way. You do? You light up when he walks into a room. You laugh at his jokes. You touch his arm when you talk to him. You wear your good perfume to dinner when he's coming over. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm sorry if I've made you feel neglected. That wasn't my intention. What was your intention, Vanessa? To keep my family together. All of it. Sophie needs stability, and that means Derek and I have to get along. And what about what I need? What do you need, Connor? I need my wife to choose me. Not just in words, but in actions. I need to feel like I'm the most important man in your life, not the runner-up. You are important to me, but not the most important. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I headed toward the stairs. I'm going to bed. We can talk more tomorrow. Connor, wait. She caught my arm. Don't take the Miami job, please. We can work this out. Can we? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you already have everything you want. Derek, Sophie, me as the reliable backup plan who pays the mortgage and doesn't ask too many questions. That's not how I see you. How do you see me, Vanessa? She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. Finally, I see you as my husband, the man I married, the man I want to grow old with, but not the man you're in love with. I love you, Connor. That's not what I asked. She let go of my arm. I don't know how to answer that. Then I guess I have my answer. I went upstairs and lay in bed listening to her move around the living room, cleaning up the wine glasses, turning off lights. When she finally came to bed, she curled up on her side again, but this time I could hear her crying softly. I wanted to comfort her. Part of me still loved her enough to want to make her pain go away. But I was tired of being the one who always gave in, always compromised, always put her needs ahead of my own. Tomorrow, I would call the Miami project team and accept their offer. Tonight, I would lie here and mourn the end of my marriage, even though it had probably been over for months. The storm outside was getting closer. I could hear the wind picking up, rattling the windows I'd so carefully designed to let in the light. Soon, the rain would come, washing away the last traces of summer and leaving everything clean and new. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine what that might feel like. I made the call to Miami at 7 a.m. before Vanessa woke up. The project director, a woman named Sarah Chen, sounded delighted to hear from me. Connor, I was hoping you'd call. When can you start? How soon do you need me? Yesterday, honestly. We've got investors breathing down our necks and a construction timeline that's already tight. If you could be here by next Monday, that would be incredible. Next Monday. 5 days to dismantle a life I'd spent 3 years building. I'll be there, I said. After I hung up, I sat in my home office looking at the architectural drawings scattered across my desk. Plans for houses I'd never see completed, projects I'd never follow through on. Max could handle most of them, and the clients would understand. They always did when money was involved. I heard Vanessa moving around upstairs, getting ready for another day of supplier meetings and inventory management. I wondered how many of those meetings were actually coffee dates with Derek, how much of her inventory was stored at his condo. My phone buzzed with a text from Max. How did last night go? I'm taking the Miami job. Need to talk to you about transitioning my projects. Holy shit, are you serious? Absolutely serious. Can you meet me at the office in an hour? Already on my way. I spent the next hour making lists. What to pack, what to sell, what to leave behind. The furniture could stay. Most of it was Vanessa's anyway, chosen to complement her aesthetic rather than mine. The personal items would fit in a few boxes, 3 years of marriage, and I could pack my entire contribution to our shared life in the back of my SUV. Max was waiting in my office when I arrived, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd been up all night thinking. Okay, he said, handing me a cup. Walk me through this. Yesterday you were trying to save your marriage. Today you're fleeing to Florida. What happened? I told him about the conversation with Vanessa, about her non-answers and careful deflections, about the way she'd looked relieved when I said I wasn't implying anything, and devastated when I said I might leave permanently. She wants to keep both of you, Max said when I finished. You as the stable provider, Derek as the exciting ex-boyfriend. That's what I figured. And you're not interested in sharing? Would you be? Max considered this. Probably not. But I'm not married to her. I don't have 3 years invested in making it work. Sunk cost fallacy, I said. Just because you've invested time and energy in something doesn't mean you should keep investing when it's clearly failing. Very logical, very architectural. How do you feel about it? Honestly, relieved. I've been walking on eggshells for months, trying not to see what was right in front of me. Now I can stop pretending. Max nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Take over the Henderson project and the downtown renovation. I'll call the clients this morning and introduce you as the lead architect. You're ready for it. What about your house? Your stuff? I'm going to pack while Vanessa's at work and leave her a note. Clean break, no drama. That seems a little cold, don't you think? She's been planning her own clean break for months. I'm just beating her to it. We spent the morning going through my active projects, transferring files, and updating client contacts. Max asked good questions and took detailed notes. He was going to be fine without me. Better than fine, actually. He had a creative vision that my recent cynicism had been stifling. At lunch, I drove to a storage facility across town and rented a unit. Then I went home and started packing. It was strange, dismantling a life in broad daylight. I felt like a burglar, even though everything I was taking belonged to me. My clothes, my books, my drafting tools, the few pieces of art I'd bought before meeting Vanessa. Personal items that had somehow become marginalized in our shared space, pushed to the back of closets and the bottom of drawers. I found things I'd forgotten I owned. A watch my father had given me for graduation. A photo of my college friends that Vanessa had deemed not suitable for display. A leather jacket I'd loved that had mysteriously disappeared from our closet, now hanging in the guest room where Derek sometimes stayed when he was too tired to drive home. By 3 o'clock, I had everything loaded in my SUV and the storage unit. The house looked exactly the same, just with a few empty spaces that Vanessa probably wouldn't notice for days. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote her a letter. Vanessa, I've accepted the position in Miami and I'm leaving tonight. I know this seems sudden, but I think we both know it's been coming for a while. I'm not angry with you. I understand that feelings change, that people grow apart, that sometimes love isn't enough to make a marriage work. I just wish you'd been honest with me instead of making me feel crazy for noticing what was happening. I've transferred my half of the mortgage to you. The house is yours now, along with everything in it. Consider it my contribution to Sophie's stability. You can reach me through my lawyer for any paperwork that needs to be signed. Max has my contact information for emergencies. But I'd prefer if we didn't speak for a while. I need time to figure out who I am without you. I hope you and Derek are happy together. I really do. You both deserve to be with someone who makes you feel alive. Take care of yourself. Connor. I left the letter on the kitchen counter next to my house keys and wedding ring. Then I walked through the rooms one more time, saying goodbye to the life I'd thought I wanted. The living room where we'd hosted dinner parties and argued about Derek. The kitchen where I'd cooked breakfast while she talked on the phone with other men. The bedroom where we'd slept like strangers for the past 6 months. I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, no last-minute urge to fight for what we'd had. Just a quiet sense of completion, like finishing a project and walking away from the construction site. My phone rang as I was getting in my car. Vanessa's number. I let it go to voicemail, then deleted the message without listening to it. I had a 12-hour drive ahead of me and a new life waiting at the end of it. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The storm that had been building for days finally broke as I hit the highway. Rain pounded my windshield, and lightning illuminated the dark sky. I turned up the radio and drove through it, heading south toward whatever came next. Behind me, Chicago disappeared in the rearview mirror. Ahead, the road stretched empty and full of possibilities. I was free. Miami hit me like a slap of humid air and possibility. The project team had found me a furnished apartment in a high-rise overlooking Biscayne Bay, all glass and steel and clean lines that reminded me why I'd become an architect in the first place. No history, no baggage, no ghosts lurking in the corners. Sarah Chen met me at the office on my first day with a stack of blueprints and an energy that was infectious. She was in her 40s, sharp as hell, and had the kind of focused intensity that came from building something important from scratch. "Welcome to paradise," she said, gesturing toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that showed off the Miami skyline. "Ready to build something amazing?" For the first time in months, I was. The resort project was everything I'd hoped for. A complete redevelopment of a waterfront property that would showcase sustainable architecture and innovative design. I threw myself into it with the enthusiasm of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. My phone buzzed constantly for the first week, Vanessa calling, texting, leaving voicemails that I deleted without listening to. Derek sending messages that ranged from confused to angry to threatening. I blocked both their numbers and focused on my new reality. Max called every few days with updates from Chicago. The transition was going smoothly, clients were happy, and my former life was functioning perfectly well without me. "How's the weather down there?" he asked during our second week check-in. "Sunny, hot, perfect for forgetting about winter." "And how's the forgetting about Vanessa part going?" "Better than expected. Hard to miss someone when you're working 14-hour days." "She's been calling the office, by the way, asking if I know how to reach you." "What did you tell her?" "That you're my former boss, not my current problem." "But Connor," she sounds pretty desperate. "Desperate to do what? Get me back so she can keep playing house with Derek while I pay the bills?" Max was quiet for a moment. Maybe. Or maybe she realized what she lost. Too late for that. But late at night, alone in my pristine apartment, I sometimes wondered if I'd been too hasty, if I'd given up too easily on something that might have been salvageable. Then I'd remember the way Vanessa had looked at Derek, the relief in her eyes when she thought I was buying her lies, and the doubt would fade. 3 weeks into my Miami adventure, I got a call that changed everything. "Mr. Hale, this is Detective Lisa Montrose with the Chicago Police Department. I'm calling about some vandalism that occurred at your former residence. Is everyone okay?" "Everyone's fine, but there was significant damage to the property and your wife..." "Ex-wife? She gave me your number, said you might have some insight into who might have done this." "What kind of damage?" "Windows broken, spray paint on the exterior walls, tires slashed on a vehicle in the driveway. The messages suggest this was personal." "What did the messages say?" "Homewrecker and cheater, mostly. Some other things I won't repeat. Mrs. Hale seems to think this might be related to some marital difficulties you were having." I almost laughed. Vanessa was trying to blame me for vandalism that had probably been done by some angry wife who'd discovered Derek's extracurricular activities. "Detective, I've been in Miami for 3 weeks. I have time cards, hotel receipts, and about 50 witnesses who can verify my whereabouts. I'm not suggesting you did this personally, Mr. Hale, but Mrs. Hale mentioned there was some tension regarding her co-parenting relationship with her ex-fiancé. She thought maybe someone you knew might have..." "Let me stop you right there. I don't know anyone who would vandalize property. And if someone did this because they were angry about Vanessa's relationship with Derek, that's between them and Derek." "So you're aware of the relationship?" "I'm aware that my ex-wife has been sleeping with her ex-fiancé for months, possibly years. I'm also aware that Derek Vaughn is the kind of man who makes enemies. But I'm not responsible for either of those things." Detective Montrose was quiet for a moment. "I see. Well, if you think of anything that might be helpful, I won't. But detective, you might want to look into Derek's other relationships. I doubt Vanessa is the only married woman he's been seeing." After I hung up, I sat on my balcony looking out at the bay and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Satisfaction. Not happiness, exactly, but a deep sense of rightness. Vanessa and Derek were dealing with the consequences of their choices, and I was 3 states away building something new. My phone rang again. Max. "Dude, did you hire someone to trash Vanessa's house?" "What? No, why would you think that?" "Because it's all over social media. Someone spray-painted homewrecker on the side of her house and slashed Derek's tires. The neighbors are having a field day." I couldn't help but smile. Karma's a bitch. Connor, this is serious. Vanessa thinks you're behind it. Vanessa thinks a lot of things. Most of them are wrong. But if someone you know did this... Max, I've been in Miami for 3 weeks. I don't know anyone in Chicago who would do something like this, and even if I did, I wouldn't ask them to. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in moving on. Then who do you think did it? Someone who found out Derek was sleeping with a married woman and decided to send a message. Or maybe one of his other girlfriends got jealous. Or maybe it was random vandalism and they're just paranoid. You really think Derek has other girlfriends? Max, Derek is a 40-year-old restaurant manager who never married the mother of his child and specializes in seducing married women. What do you think? Max laughed despite himself. When you put it like that, exactly. This isn't about me. This is about them finally facing the reality of what they've been doing. But even as I said it, I felt a small, dark part of myself hoping that whoever had vandalized the house would strike again. Not because I wanted Vanessa to be hurt, but because I wanted her to understand what it felt like to have your comfortable life disrupted by forces beyond your control. I wanted her to know what it felt like to be me. The next morning, I threw myself back into work with renewed energy. I had a life to build, a career to advance, and a future to design. Whatever was happening in Chicago was no longer my problem. But late that night, as I was falling asleep to the sound of waves against the shore, I found myself wondering who had spray-painted those words on my former home, and whether they might be interested in expanding their artistic endeavors. Not that I would ever ask, of course. I was above petty revenge, mostly. 2 months into my Miami exile, I was settling into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Work during the day, gym in the evening, drinks with my new colleagues on weekends. I'd even been on a few dates. Nothing serious. Just reminders that there were women in the world who didn't come with complicated histories and ex-fiancés. Then Derek called. I'd unblocked his number the week before, curious to see if he'd try to contact me. His name on my caller ID at 10 p.m. on a Thursday was almost satisfying. Connor, it's Derek. We need to talk. Do we? I can't think of anything we have to discuss. It's about Vanessa. She's not doing well. That's unfortunate. Also, not my problem. Look, I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Derek. Angry would require caring about what you and Vanessa do with your lives. I'm indifferent. She lost the boutique. That stopped me. What? The landlord doubled her rent. She couldn't make the payments without your income. She had to close last week. I felt a flicker of something, not quite sympathy, but not satisfaction either. Vanessa had worked hard to build that business, even if she'd been neglecting it lately for her extracurricular activities. That's too bad, I said finally. But I'm sure she'll figure something out. She's resourceful. Connor, she's broke. She can't make the mortgage payments on the house. She's talking about moving back in with her mother. And you're calling me because I can't help her. The restaurant's barely breaking even, and I've got my own bills to pay. Ah, so the white knight routine only works when someone else is footing the bill. It's not like that. Isn't it? You were happy to play house with my wife when I was paying for the house. Now that there are actual consequences, suddenly you can't afford to be her hero. Derek was quiet for a moment. She made a mistake, Connor. We both did. But she doesn't deserve to lose everything. She made a choice, Derek. Multiple choices, over multiple months. Choices have consequences. What about Sophie? She doesn't deserve to be uprooted from the only home she's known. And there it was, the guilt card. The one argument that might have worked 6 months ago, when I still thought of myself as Sophie's stepfather. Sophie isn't my daughter, I said. She's yours. If you're concerned about her stability, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to blow up her mother's marriage. Jesus, Connor. When did you become so cold? About the time I realized my wife was sleeping with her ex-fiancé and lying to my face about it. Funny how betrayal affects people differently. I hung up before he could respond. but the call bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I felt guilty about Vanessa's financial problems. She'd made her bed, literally and figuratively, but because Derek's desperation suggested that their grand romance wasn't working out quite the way they'd planned. I called Max the next morning. "How's the gossip mill treating our favorite couple?" "Not well," Max said. "Word is Derek's been seeing someone else, a hostess at his restaurant. 23 years old, blonde, looks nothing like Vanessa. Shocking. A man who cheats with married women turns out to be unreliable. Vanessa found out last week. There was apparently a scene at the restaurant. Security cameras caught the whole thing. Define scene." Vanessa threw a drink in Derek's face, called the hostess a few names that would make a sailor blush, and stormed out. The video's been making the rounds on local social media. I felt that dark satisfaction again. Karma really is a bitch. Connor, I have to ask, are you sure you had nothing to do with the vandalism? Or with Derek's restaurant problems? What restaurant problems? Health department showed up for a surprise inspection last week, found some violations that are going to cost him serious money to fix, and his liquor license is under review for some paperwork discrepancies. Sounds like Derek's having a run of bad luck. Sounds like someone's making their own luck. Someone with connections and resources and a very good reason to want Derek Vaughn to suffer. I was quiet for a moment, thinking. I hadn't orchestrated Derek's problems, but I couldn't say I was sorry they were happening, and if someone else was pulling strings behind the scenes. Max, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to make life difficult for Derek and Vanessa without breaking any laws, how would they go about it? Hypothetically? Hypothetically. Well, Derek's restaurant operates on pretty thin margins. Any disruption to his cash flow, surprise inspections, permit delays, bad reviews from influential food bloggers could put him in serious trouble. And Vanessa's boutique was already struggling. A few key suppliers deciding not to extend credit, a landlord deciding to enforce lease terms more strictly. That's a lot of coincidences. It is. Almost like someone with knowledge of both businesses was systematically undermining them. Someone like who? Someone with connections in the city planning office. Someone who might know which inspectors to call, which permits to question, which suppliers are most vulnerable to pressure. I thought about my former colleagues, the network of professionals I'd built relationships with over 15 years in Chicago. Architects worked with everyone. Contractors, inspectors, suppliers, landlords. We knew who owed favors and who could be influenced. That would be quite an operation, I said. It would, but also quite effective, and completely legal, as long as no one could prove coordination. Interesting theory. Connor, if you're behind this... I'm not behind anything, Max. I'm in Miami, building a resort and trying to forget I was ever married. But if someone else wants to hold Derek and Vanessa accountable for their choices, that's between them and their conscience. And if that someone asked for your advice? I'd tell them that revenge is a dish best served cold, and that the best revenge is living well. That's very philosophical. I'm a very philosophical person these days. After I hung up, I sat on my balcony and thought about justice. Not the legal kind. Derek and Vanessa hadn't broken any laws by having an affair, but the cosmic kind, the kind that balanced the scales when people hurt each other without consequences. I hadn't orchestrated their downfall, but I wasn't sorry it was happening. And if someone else, someone with connections and resources and a very good understanding of how Chicago's business community worked, wanted to ensure that actions had consequences, well, that wasn't my responsibility. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard you might appreciate an update on our mutual acquaintances. The restaurant closes next week. Boutique's already gone. Justice is served cold, just like you said. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. But I was smiling as I watched the sun set over Biscayne Bay. Some dishes were worth the wait. 6 months after leaving Chicago, I was a different man. Tanned from the Miami sun, 20 pounds lighter from daily runs along the beach, and professionally thriving in ways I'd never imagined. The resort project was ahead of schedule and under budget, earning me recognition from the firm's partners and interest from other major developers. I was also, for the first time in years, genuinely happy. Then Vanessa showed up at my office. Sarah knocked on my door at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, wearing the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "Connor, there's a woman here to see you. Says she's your wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected automatically. "And I'm not available." "She's been waiting for 2 hours. She says she's not leaving until she talks to you." I looked through my office window toward the reception area. Vanessa sat in one of our modern chairs, looking small and tired in a way that was completely unlike the confident woman I'd married. Her hair was shorter, her clothes less expensive, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Give me 5 minutes, then send her in." Those 5 minutes felt like an hour. I straightened my tie, organized the papers on my desk, and tried to prepare myself for whatever desperate gambit had brought her to Florida. When she walked into my office, I was struck by how much she'd changed. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by off-the-rack jeans and a simple blouse. Her manicure was chipped, her makeup minimal, and she moved with the careful precision of someone trying to hold themselves together. "Hello, Connor." "Vanessa, this is unexpected. I tried calling. You changed your number." "I did. Sit down." She took the chair across from my desk, the same position she'd taken in my Chicago office all those months ago when she'd told me about dinner with Derek. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "You look good," she said. "Healthy, happy." "I am. What do you want, Vanessa?" "I want to apologize. For everything. For Derek. For lying to you. For taking you for granted. I was stupid and selfish, and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." "Okay, apology noted. Is that all?" "I want you to come home." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She looked sincere, but Vanessa had always been good at looking sincere when she needed something. "Home to what? Your mother's house? Because I heard you lost our house." She flinched. "I lost everything, Connor. The boutique, the house, most of my friends. Derek—" She laughed bitterly. "Derek turned out to be exactly what you said he was. A selfish asshole who only cared about me when someone else was paying the bills." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you? Because from what I've heard, you've been pulling strings to make sure my life fell apart." "Have I? That's interesting. What exactly have you heard?" "Derek's restaurant failed after a series of mysterious inspections and permit problems. My suppliers all suddenly demanded cash up front. My landlord decided to enforce lease terms he'd been ignoring for years. All of it happened right after you left town." "Sounds like a run of bad luck." "Bullshit, Connor. We both know you have connections all over the city. We both know you're smart enough to orchestrate something like this without leaving fingerprints." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Miami skyline. "Let's say, hypothetically, that I did have something to do with your recent problems. What would you do about it?" "I'd ask you to stop. I'd beg you to stop if that's what it took." "And why would I do that?" "Because I'm sorry. Because I love you. Because we could start over, build something better." I turned back to face her. "Vanessa, do you know what the difference is between you and me?" "What?" "When my life fell apart, I built a new one. When your life fell apart, you came running back to me. That tells me everything I need to know about what I meant to you." "That's not fair." "It's completely fair. You had Derek, you had your business, you had your friends and your social circle and your comfortable little life. I was just the reliable backup plan, the guy who paid the bills while you figured out what you really wanted." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Tell me honestly, Vanessa. If Derek had been able to support you financially, would you be here right now?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know." "I do. You'd still be with him, and I'd still be the idiot ex-husband who got played by his cheating wife. The only reason you're here is because your grand romance didn't work out the way you planned." Connor, please. I'm not finished. You want to know if I orchestrated your downfall? The answer is no. I didn't make any phone calls, send any emails, or ask anyone for favors. But I also didn't lift a finger to help you when your world started crumbling. You could have warned me. Warned you about what? That actions have consequences? That Derek was exactly the kind of man who would dump you the minute things got complicated? You're a grown woman, Vanessa. You made your choices. She was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. I made mistakes, I know that. But I love you, Connor. I've always loved you. No, you haven't. You loved what I provided: security, stability, someone who would put up with Derek's constant presence in our lives and pretend it was normal. You loved having your cake and eating it too. That's not. It is. And you know what? I'm grateful. Your affair forced me to take a hard look at my life and realize I deserved better. Better than a wife who was embarrassed to be seen with me. Better than a marriage where I was always the third wheel. Better than settling for someone who saw me as a consolation prize. I walked back to my desk and sat down. I'm happy here, Vanessa. Happier than I've been in years. I have a job I love, colleagues who respect me, and a future that's entirely my own. Why would I give that up to go back to being your safety net? Because we were good together. Before Derek, before everything got complicated, we were happy. We were comfortable. There's a difference. We could be happy again. Maybe, but I don't want to find out. I want to be with someone who chooses me first, not someone who comes back to me when all her other options fall through. She sat in silence for several minutes, staring at her hands. Finally, she looked up. What about Sophie? What about her? She misses you. She asks about you all the time. That hit harder than I'd expected. Sophie had been an innocent victim in all of this, a 7-year-old girl who'd gotten attached to her mother's husband and couldn't understand why he'd disappeared from her life. I'm sorry Sophie is hurt, I said. But she's not my daughter. She has a father, and it's his job to provide stability for her. Derek's not. He's not good at that. He never has been. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to blow up your life for him. Vanessa stood up, her shoulders sagging in defeat. So that's it? You won't even consider— No, I won't. I'm sorry you're struggling, Vanessa. I really am. But I'm not your solution anymore. She nodded slowly, gathering her purse and what was left of her dignity. At the door, she turned back one last time. I hope you find someone who makes you happy, Connor. You deserve that. I already have, I said. I found myself. After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, looking out at the bay and thinking about the conversation. I'd expected to feel something: anger, satisfaction, maybe even regret. Instead, I felt nothing but a quiet sense of closure. My phone buzzed with a text from Max. Heard Vanessa's in town. Everything okay? Everything's perfect, I texted back. The past is finally where it belongs. That evening, I had dinner with Sarah and a few other colleagues at a restaurant overlooking the water. We talked about the resort project, about future opportunities, about the kind of architecture that could withstand hurricanes and time, and the changing needs of the people who lived in the buildings we designed. As the sun set over Biscayne Bay, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized that I'd finally built something that would last. Not a marriage based on convenience and compromise, but a life based on choice and possibility. I raised my glass to toast the future, and for the first time in years, I had no idea what came next. It was the most beautiful uncertainty I'd ever experienced.